Hi, this is Dr. Tom Gerard, Doctor of Business Administration, and I want to talk about in this video levels of measurement. And this is one of the first things you encounter in your statistics course. So, there's different types of data, and they have meaning when you're trying to measure things. So, just real quickly, the four types of data are nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. Nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. Now, so think about nominal. Nominal comes from the word naming. Naming, you're naming things. So what kind of an apple is that? Oh, it's a Red Delicious, or it's a Macintosh. Or, hey, what kind of flooring are you going to put in your new house? Well, we're going to put a carpet over here in the living room, but in this kitchen, we're going to have tile. But over here in our den, we're going to have some hardwood floors. And so those are all different types of floor, different types of apples, and they're just naming them. And so think about from the statistics, which you all know, it's about a lot of math and calculations. You can't divide types of flooring. You don't know whether the Red Delicious apple is different from the Macintosh apple just because of the name of the apple, right? Now, maybe you have a preference for a different type of apple, but we're not talking about that. We're just talking about naming it. It could even be colors: red, green, yellow. Those are names of things, okay? And so you can name things, and there's a very important factor that you use those to separate out categories. For example, what's the big thing in polls and stuff? It's in politics. Well, in politics, we've got the Republicans and the Democrats and the Independents, the Libertarians, and those are all names, but you can't divide that. You can't calculate. You can't do a ratio of dividing a Democrat into a Republican. And I'm not even going to go there, but you get the idea that you're naming them, and that's it. So, but there is a category, because if you wanted to know the difference between Democrats and Republicans on a particular variable, you can. Maybe you want to know how much sugar content is in the Red Delicious as opposed to the Macintosh, right? Or you want to know which is easiest to clean up a spill between the hardwood and the carpet, right? So we can measure the spillage, we can measure the sugar, we can measure somebody's attitude about something based upon whether or they're not a Republican or a Democrat, or whether it's this kind of apple or that kind of apple. But that's about it. We can only name it. Now, the next one is ordinal. So now we have things in ordinal, and this is one of those things where the kid goes home and he says, "Mom, I got the second best grade in the test today." And oh my gosh, that's really great. You did wonderful. And he goes, "Yeah, but it was just me and one other kid." So the thing with that is that in order he did less than the first kid, but you don't know how much worse he did. It's like, oh, I came in second in the race. Okay, you ran the race, you came in second. We know that you weren't first, you came in after. So the order was the first person, then their second, and then the third and fourth, and so on. The thing is, you don't know, did the second person come in a second after the first person, or did he come in an hour later? You don't really know. It's ordinal data. So think about ordinal in, is it high, medium, or low? Many times we have some type of a thing that we buy, and it has a knob on it that says high, medium, and low. Well, does that mean that high blows out, like it's your air conditioner or something on your car? Does that blow out, 5 times as much air as low, or 2 times? That you don't. You just know it's high, medium, and low. How about the meat, right? You go, how do you like your meat? Well, I like it rare, or I like it medium rare, or I like it well done. And, maybe if you're a cook and you understand more things about than I do, you might be able to kind of tell that, well, this one is on the stove for a little bit longer than the previous one, but I don't know. It's ordinal data. It's in order, but we don't know the distance between the two things. So then the next one is interval. Now, interval is, we know the order, but we also know the distance between, right? So instead of being first, second, third, we're in a race where you don't know, you would know that the interval is the difference. So think about the temperature. How cold is it today? Well, it's 40 degrees, and tomorrow it's supposed to be 50 degrees, and yesterday it was 20 degrees. So we know those temperatures, that they're in order, of course, because of the temperature, but you also know the distance. Well, it's 10 degrees more than it was yesterday. It was 10 degrees more tomorrow. How about the surgeries? Well, oh, I had my back surgery in 2004, and but that was only 2 years after I had my gallbladder taken out. I don't know, So you know that it's 2 more years, right? It's ordinal, but then you also know the interval. The interval was 2 years. Well, I had my gallbladder out on 2002, and then I had my back surgery in 2004, and then in 2006, then I had that, carpal tunnel surgery, Now, by the way, of course, I'm making all this stuff up just to make a point. Now, the thing is about it is the 0 is a point on the scale, but it has really no meaning. So if you said, well, the temperature outside is 0, you know that, okay, well, there's 0 degrees, and maybe we've experienced that, where you're somewhere where it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit. But if it doesn't mean that there's no temperature, right? If I said there's 0 temperature, well, that doesn't make sense, right? Because there's always going to be some kind of a temperature that you could measure. So 0 is a point on the scale, very much like the temperature, right? As far as like the surgeries, you could say, well, in 2004, and then in 2008, I had another surgery. But then you wouldn't say, well, 2008 is 2 times more or multiples of the previous year. How about this one? I left my house for work. I left at 6 o'clock, and then the next day I slept in, and I didn't leave until 8 o'clock. But you wouldn't say I left at 0 o'clock, right? So there's, that doesn't make any sense. There's a time in the way we live with a 24-hour clock. There's always going to be a time. There's no such thing as a 0 time, right? Okay, so that brings us to the last one, and that's ratio data. And so ratio 0 means something. So for example, if your height, if you're 6 foot or 5'3" or 4'11", or you're 7'2", but if you said somebody, well, there's zero height, then they don't. That's non-existent. So your age, if you're 0 ages, that means you're not born yet or something, right? So in that case, that 0 means nothing exists. Okay, so remember on the other one, like temperature, 0 is a point on the scale. On interval, on ratio, 0 is means nothing is there. Okay, so those between ratio and interval can get very confused, and a lot of studies that are done in research and statistics use what's called the Likert scale. Many of you have probably taken one of those where it says, I agree, disagree, and then scientists, researchers assign number values to those, like a 3 is a neutral, a 2 is I agree, and a 1 is I strongly agree. And so they calculate those in statistics many times as a ratio data, but in reality they're really more on the line of interval or even ordinal, because we don't really know if you strongly agree, is that how much different is that than when you say I agree, right? Or I'm neutral, or I somewhat agree. Sometimes you have a 7-point scale. So you don't really know the difference. So there's a disagreement sometimes with researchers of whether that's ordinal, or is it interval, or is it ratio. But we still do some calculations on that. Primarily what we really want to do statistics is ratio scale data, where we can actually multiply and add and divide numbers, and you'll know that sometimes we'll encounter a time when we have a 0 and it doesn't work out right in the math, and then there's statistical mathematical things that is done, which we'll see later, to account for that. But yet we still can sometimes calculate 0. So I just wanted to introduce you to the concept of types of data, and it is one of the founding concepts that you encounter first in statistics. So thanks for listening, and subscribe, and that way you'll know when my other videos come out. Thanks.